I got the time right here. I got the time right now.
I'm here in Minneapolis, Minnesota,
That's right.
hot town right now. And
Time
my our
is
guest
all I
and
got
commentator,
right
our weekly
here.
commentator, is in Brooklyn,
Time
New
is
York.
on my side,
Also,
and baby, I know
kind of
that
hot right
anywhere
now.
I'm going,
Why is it
time
hot?
is
We're
my
going to talk
friend,
about
and
it
I'm damn sure
with
glad.
Brother David from Brooklyn. My name is Don Strong. The show is called Brother David from Brooklyn Speaks. He's got a lot of experience. He's got a lot of wisdom. He's got the 411 that you will not hear in any school. So listen up. He's going to give you some wisdom right now. Brother David, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
How are you
All
doing?
right. I'm doing fine. This is right up my alley because I think it's very important for people to get things I'm going to say because you're not going to get this in most schools. They're going to mention nothing about it. So if we could start, um, let's say during the period of the early 1600s, let's
So
say, and this,
I'm not sure if I said it, but so what we're talking about is the history of racism in the U.S. Is that correct?
yes, yes,
Okay,
but I got to give a foundation to it.
okay, please do.
Yes, we have to go back to 1619 when kidnapped Africans were brought to this country um, and sold into slavery. At the same time, during that period, there were people who were Europeans from various countries in Europe, such as England and Scotland and Wales and Ireland and so forth, who were brought here also. So you had these two groups of people who were working for the ruling class who owned the land that was stolen from the indigenous people. And what happened is that these people that were over here as indentured servant, slaves, or contract laborers work together and they get along somewhat. And until the point of, let's say, Bacon's Rebellion in Virginia, and this was a sign where you had people who were from Africa and Europe together going against the ruling class and rebelling. So they saw that as a bad sign. And that meant that they had to come up with something. So that's when they developed the system of white supremacy in the latter part of the 1600s. And that's when they started to divide people up. The way you rule people is you divide them. You divide them. So when they saw that the European people with the light type of phenotype is the way you look, and African people that were brought over the darker phenotype, you got to separate them. So by the end of the 1600s, they put into effect laws to separate people. So that is the basic foundation of how those who rule the country, even to today, rule people. You got to divide them up because race is a false concept. We're talking about Homo sapiens, so you have to do what you can if you're going to control them to divide them up. And that has gone out through the years until today. So, what we have is a system where a small group of people can manipulate large groups of people with their different phenotypes and ethnicities and whatnot to rule and make profit for themselves. So that means that workers, those enslaved African people who are exploited, and the Europeans who are workers who are exploited. You got to keep them divided up, and that's how you make the profit and rule. You have them contending against each other and doing what you have to do to keep them separated, and so you can make more profit. This is all about making profit, and that's what you got onto this day, where you can divide people, separate them to such an extent that their attention is away from you. If you look at the television, listen to the radio and the newspapers, you're not going to see any essentially bad stories about the ruling class people. The attention is always going to be on something else. You know, working class people, have working class white people, and working class black people, and poor white people, poor black people, contending against each other, rather than dealing with the real enemy, which is the ruling class. That's the enemy, not the people, not the poor white people, not the poor black people. But when you can tell people that you're superior because of your light phenotype, uh, some of them will swallow it. And it's like a bullfight. When you're seeing a bullfight, for those of you who have not seen it, the matador always has the bull attention, giving his attention to the cape. When the fact is that he's not standing behind the cape. Well, it's the same thing with racism. Racism is based on enriching a few at the expense of many. And that's what's going on today. So there are many different things about it. Occasionally, if there's an uprising, you'll maybe throw out some bones and to one group. And what happens is when one group sees there's some bones thrown out, they will have a backlash, and and that it will be reversed. So whatever is done for the enrichment of those at the top, and most people have no clue of what's going on, and some of them even believe in this race nonsense about different races and so forth. But that's not what it's about. This is about divide and conquer. I could go on all day and tell you about all the things that have happened to me in my experience of a number of years, let's say. But I mean, that would take all day. But we have to keep in mind that this is a play. It's a play upon the people to enrich the few at the expense of the many. And that's the message, the takeaway message that people have to know.
Okay. This one point that you made kind of in passing on your talk, we're talking about how it is the tactic of the ruling class to divide people and conquer everybody who's not in the 1% or 1/10 of 1%. The whether it's the plantation owners, the English rulers who were in charge of the 13 colonies, et cetera, and who invented this system of white supremacy in the U.S. Just the way they invented apartheid in South Africa, because or Jim Crow, et cetera. So you said in passing that this thing about race is really not accurate, and I want to take you up on that, because that challenges some basic beliefs and maybe some science about how the human race is has these subdivisions. Of course, every human being on the planet has common ancestry in Africa, right? Because
Yes.
that's where the human being comes from, and that's been proven by the anthropologists and the people that study the history of the evolution of the human species. They know this. All the scientists who probably are of European descent anyway, but they admit this and they put it out there. It's usually not publicized on corporate media, et cetera, et cetera. But
or,
so
or in schools.
in school, right? Exactly. It's not in school. You have to dig and find that on your own. So just I'd like you to speak for a minute or two. Why is it that you put forth the idea that race is an incorrect or erroneous concept?
I'm doing that because uh, it's important for people to understand that the origin of the species was in Africa, and that maybe tens and tens of thousands of years ago, many people left Africa and went to different parts of the world, went to places, let's say, in Europe and Asia and various places. And after tens and tens and tens of thousands of years, um, people accommodate to the environment where they are living. I mean, you see, that's why it's important for people to learn about anthropology. In other words, the people, let's say, who went to Europe, uh, it was advantageous for them to have lighter skin in Europe to get in some of that vitamin D from the small amount of sun. Their hair might have been different, uh, more stringy than helix. Helix is curly hair. Africans, many of them have helix type hair. That's curly, whereas in Europe you'll find more straight hair. So after thousands of years, people's body adjusted to the environment. People over in Asia, like Japan and whatnot, some people have an epicanthic fold over their eyes, and that is good for dealing with wind. So the point is that people change, but the point is we're the same species. If a person from one place mates with a person at another part of the world, and even though they have different phenotypes, and phenotype is the way you look, uh, they can produce an offspring. You couldn't produce an offspring if it was a total different species. So this idea of race is a way for those who rule to control people. That's the whole idea of it. Now, people need to do some study. People need to read Theodore Allen's book, The Invention of the White Race, 2-volume book. And that'll teach you a lot of stuff. So uh, the thing is that they're not going to teach you these things in school because it's not in the interest of the ruling class. They want to have people thinking that they're all different and having them compete against each other rather than working for common good. So we're living in a country where it's dominated by a small group and operated in their interests at the expense of the masses of people. That's what we have going on. And most people don't get it. They don't have any understanding of what I'm talking about.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the word of Brother David from Brooklyn speaking again tonight. We'll be back next week with another installment. Keep your ears peeled, keep your eyes open, educate yourselves. We will put the information on YouTube of the sources that Brother David has spoken about this evening, and we hope you take advantage of it. My name is Don Strong. I'm your host here for the show, and want to thank you for tuning in, and hope to see you again soon. Tell your friends. Peace. Good night.
Good night.
Good deal.
I got the secret here in my shirt pocket. You can have the time you're needed. You can just float with me. Ride it, baby, ride it, baby, ride it up like the sea.